There's some really weird versions of movies out there that have never made it to the public eye. Whether it's 3 versions of Blade Runner doing the rounds to the chagrin of purist nerds the world over, or that Pretty Woman script that saw Julia Roberts as a drug-addled mess who got dumped at the end, or even, perhaps most shockingly of all, a version of Suicide Squad that people actually liked. It's almost unbelievable, right? More often than not, these changes are made thanks to the help of a handy test audience, a group of people who sift through the first iterations of films and wield the power to make or break them with their reactions. And much like an unfortunate trip to the clinic, not every film comes out clean. Collecting together some of the most famous films that got a whole load of treatment then, these are the scenes that got watchers so riled up that they had to be taken out entirely. With that in mind, I'm Ash from Whatculture, and these are 8 movie scenes you didn't see thanks to test audiences. 8. Carmen and Xander kiss, Starship Troopers. The 90s answer to intergalactic warfare, Starship Troopers is the perfect mix of action, science fiction, and good old-fashioned bug squashing. But it didn't start out as the cult classic it's grown to be. At least, not quite. You'd think test audiences might take offence at the gore and murder, or perhaps the tone of the warfare, or even the young protagonists pushed into the armed forces. But it was in fact the love triangle surrounding Rico's girlfriend Carmen that got them so angry the footage had to be edited out. Sounds like the test group might have had some bad breakups. Director Paul Verhoeven took the choice to remove scenes with Carmen and Rico's school rival Xander getting closer and sharing a kiss, to appease the angry mob that decidedly hated her character from the first version of the movie. A small change, but one that obviously had a big effect on watchers. 7. Floating Heads, It. One of the breakout horror movies of 2017 and igniting Stephen King fever once more, the first instalment of Andres Muschietti's It is memorable in all the right ways. Expertly blending psychological horror with the Goonies and tinged with an Instagram filter-worthy shade of 80s nostalgia, the film brings together all the best qualities of a good King novel and turns them into terrifying reality. It should come as no surprise then that in true King fashion, a fair amount of changes had to be made after test audiences first saw the movie, due to the sheer amount of explicit violence shown on screen. According to one viewer, the original cut contained more gruesome, upfront death scenes, decapitated heads in the barrens, as well as longer speaking scenes for Stan and Bill's mother. Everything was far darker and more intense, with plenty more bodies that all float down in the sewer, bumping the runtime up to over 3 hours. Yikes. 6. Scott ends up with knives, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The comic book showdown of Scott Pilgrim vs. the League of Evil Exes feels entirely satisfying when he wins over the enigmatic Ramona Flowers at the end of the movie. Taking down a horde of angry men and women with the power of love and the help of some dairy, Scott leaving with the woman he's poured all this effort into just makes sense by all romantic comedy standards. Initially, however, this wasn't how the movie played out. Leaving instead with his young, infatuated girlfriend from earlier in the film, Knives Chow, audiences were disappointed that all the work of Scott in the film didn't pay off as expected. The deviation from the graphic novel's ending didn't help either. Just give us the coupling we paid for and stop messing around. 5. The Cauldron Born, The Black Cauldron. Potentially Disney's darkest release, the 80s animation The Black Cauldron is all your classic fantasy dreams brought to life, with everything from magical princesses to a prescient pig. Yes, you heard that right, and it brings a whole new meaning to Babes Gone Wild. The first test screening saw crying children galore, fleeing from the cinema after being terrified by the creation of undead monsters through the titular Black Cauldron, of which a fractional amount of footage remains in the final cut. It turns out, kids don't really like seeing people melted down into fleshy goop in their cartoons. What are you gonna do? A commercial failure and one of the most expensive animations Disney had done, it's no wonder nothing else similar was attempted after release. But honestly, it's an absolute banger of a movie, and one of my favourite Disney films purely because of how little it gives a shit about being pleasant in any way. Big up The Black Cauldron. 4. Slower, gorier, and much more painful. Goodfellas. Telling the tale of Henry Hill and his life in the mob, Goodfellas is one of the most famous and well-executed gangster movies in circulation. You know it's got its place in history when there's a whole pizza company named after it. The true definition of living the dream. Martin Scorsese's first movie to have been forced into a test screening, it sent 40 people out of the cinema before the first 10 minutes were up. with far gorier scenes, uncomfortable moments, and an extended period at the end of the film where Henry's last drug-fueled day becomes unbearably long and agitating, the audience members that stayed weren't rewarded with much other than unsettling and disturbing scenes. Scorsese subsequently transformed the last act of the film with jump cuts, and then toned down the violence that sent audiences packing initially. 3. Jim dies. 28 days later. Danny Boyle's reinvigoration of the zombie genre 28 days later had some chopping and changing before it was pumped full of lightning and resurrected, sent out to cinemas to infect the mass populace with zombie fever for the next 10 years. Of course, if you hadn't guessed it already, the original cut was far darker, bleaker and pessimistic, depicting main man Jim bleeding out on a hospital gurney, leaving Selena and Hannah to fend for themselves. After watching the group battle their way to safety over the course of the film, the ending we got was far more satisfying and a lovely break from the usual intensely downbeat endings of horror movies. Watching Jim die and the women leave in silence was deemed far too sad during the film's test screenings, where watchers presumed they were walking to certain death, and so the scene was switched out before release. 2. Average Joes lose the match. Dodgeball, a true underdog story. Dodgeball, a true underdog story, is one of those movies that doesn't have any right to be as good as it is. It's funny, touching, and Vince Vaughn is entirely bearable, managing to hit all the right notes in a real reflection of its title. Portraying local gym goers competing in a dodgeball tournament to save their establishment from an evil corporate chain, it's of course going to be the case that the little guys come out on top. The clue is in the title, or at least that's what you'd think. The original ending saw the film scupper the entire feel-good message of the movie and end on a cut that meant Average Joe's Jim lost the game with zero redemption, flipping to the credits on potentially the most downbeat moment for a comedy movie ever. Kind of hilarious? Yes, but still ridiculously harsh considering the message of the film that we got. Test audiences were the ones to demand the change, resulting in the post-credit scene of Ben Stiller in a fat suit berating watchers for not appreciating complexity after the switch of footage. 1. Wade kills baby Hitler. Deadpool 2. As you all know, Deadpool is renowned for his risque humour, getting up to antics such as blowing his own head off and getting his baby-sized dick out during the most recent instalment to the franchise. Whilst edging ever closer to the line and relishing the shock factor an R-rated Marvel movie can comfortably provide, even the merc with a mouth didn't escape test audiences taking a sharp inhale of breath at the end of Deadpool 2. In perhaps one of the most boundary-pushing post-credit scenes ever, the film originally had a joke that was either horrifying or brilliant, depending on how much of a terrible person you are. After utilising time travel technology to shoot himself as Ryan Reynolds for reading the Green Lantern script and correcting the ending of X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool travels back in time to potentially kill a newborn Hitler in hospital. Obviously, that upset some people. Bit on the nose, that one. And that's our list. What scenes do you think should have stayed in their movies? Are test audiences complete morons, or the geniuses we need? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash, and this has been Whatculture. Make sure to subscribe to the Whatculture YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. Thanks for watching!